Talk about the Dáil now and the resumption of the Dáil post-summer recess, when all eyes, of course, will be on the budget, and there will, in those debates and discussions, be references to Ireland's progressive tax system. Now, that is just a system where the tax rate increases as the taxable amount increases. In other words, the more you earn, the higher your rate of tax. There are some who would suggest Ireland has a progressive tax system that we should be proud of. For others, it is not progressive enough. Paul Murphy is a People Before Profit TD for Dublin South West. He's with me in studio. Paul, you're welcome to studio. Are you in the latter camp? Should it be more progressive?
Yes. I mean, when you look at income tax in an isolated way, there's no question that's progressive. I mean, if it's progressive by definition. You pay to a higher rate, the more that you earn. When you look at other forms of taxation, including indirect taxation like VAT, then things become more complicated. So it's quite a while since the study was done, but there was a study about 15 years ago which looked at the percentage of income of the bottom 10% and the top 10% and how much goes on tax. And the bottom 10% and the top 10% basically paid the same percentage of their total income on tax. The bottom 10%, very little of that will be paid in terms of income tax. But when you're spending all of your money on food, on fuel, etc., you're paying quite high levels of indirect taxation. So we have, before you apply any taxation in this country or any social welfare, we are the most unequal country in terms of income in the European Union. After you pay tax and after you get social welfare, that comes down to still being quite unequal, but not quite as bad, and that the tax brings that in. The other thing that I think we need to talk about in this conversation, and it's a big untalked about thing, is the question of corporation tax. Because, profits going to corporations has tripled since 2010. It's gone from 40 billion to 120 billion. That's taxable profits. They pay tax on that really about 6%. I mean, officially 12.5%. But if you're a worker on 50,000 euros a year, you're paying a marginal rate of tax of 52%, and you can be a corporation earning billions in profits, and you're only paying 12.5%. Officially, in reality, you're paying even less. And the share of wealth, of income, going to corporations rather than labour has shot up over the last couple of decades.
So should we reduce the burden on those lower income earners so that they are not paying as much or as much percentage terms as the higher income earners? Should we increase the tax burden on those higher income earners and on those corporations, or a bit of all of the above?
Yeah, I mean, we would completely reshape the taxation system. Bearing in mind, we need to raise revenue, and more revenue than is currently raised, in order to actually provide public services to address the health crisis, the housing crisis in terms of education. Everywhere we look, we have a crisis with very high levels of poverty, very high levels of in-work, low pay, 1 in 5 workers being low paid, and so on. So there's a lot that can be done. The way we would do that is we would scrap the USC for all workers below 90,000 euros and turn it into a high income social charge. We would introduce new rates of taxation for those over 100,000 euros. So those who are earning quite substantial amounts of money, 150,000 plus, 200,000 plus, 250,000, we can have different rates of tax, not treating a worker on 50,000 the same as someone on 250,000. And then we would cut the loopholes in terms of corporations and increase the rate of tax to 20%. Let's at least have them paying as much as the standard rate of tax, these corporations that are earning billions.
Jim Power, the Economist, is on the line. Jim, as tax reforms go, how do you rate that?
Well, the reality is that the IMF, the OECD and other international bodies who have analysed our tax system would argue correctly that Ireland has one of the most progressive income tax systems in the world. This year, we're going to collect around 26.7 billion in income tax. That will account for 39% of total taxation. Back in 2006, income tax accounted for around 27% of total taxation. So income tax has become an increasingly important component of our overall tax take. And if you look at the statistics, the top 1% of earners pay 22% of that income tax. The top 20% of workers pay 77% of that income tax. And the bottom 75% of income earners earning below 56,000 a year pay just 18%. So that is an incredibly progressive income tax system. Those people who earn the most pay the most income tax. And that is something that the left will never, ever admit to. Okay, so the facts are out there, and I think they are incontrovertible. Okay, then if you go and look at the corporation tax situation, this year or last year we collected just over 15 billion in in corporation tax.
Yeah.
This year we're going to collect something between 18 and 20 billion. So multinationals pay the bulk of that, and they are paying a lot of taxation into the system here. But also they provide directly 275,000 jobs in our economy. They support just over 200,000 indirect jobs in our economy. So if you want to create a tax system, and just remember that the global corporation tax environment is a very competitive one. So if you want to significantly deteriorate the tax environment facing those multinationals, capital is mobile, the jobs will go elsewhere, and that 18 to 20 billion we're going to collect this year will disappear. And likewise, if you demonize people on higher incomes, those people are also mobile. They're going to get the hell out of the country. You know, why would they operate in a system where they're handing over a huge percentage of their income?
Yeah. Okay. Let me go back to Paul. Let me go back to Paul just because a couple of points there. We'll deal with them in reverse order. Are you demonising high income earners?
No, not at all. I mean, we think it is appropriate.
You would like them to pay more than they're currently paying.
We'd like to pay, yes, genuinely high income earners, those on 100,000 plus, 150,000 plus, 200,000 plus. We think it's appropriate that they pay more. If you choose not to tax these people, then the choice you're making is yes, they keep more of their income, but
they are being taxed.
They are, absolutely. But if you choose not to tax them more, the choice is that we're not addressing the 10,000 people who are homeless, the 500,000 young people who can't move out of their home. We're not addressing the massive waiting list in terms of health. They're the choices. If you don't tax to raise income to spend on public services, then you have the kind of situation. I mean, we're the fifth richest country in the world, and yet look around at all the crises that we have.
Jim, I want to go back to you on that public services argument, but first, just the accusation that you're in danger of chasing some of those 275,000 jobs that rely on multinationals out of the country by introducing a higher rate of corporation tax.
Obviously, this is the argument that the corporations want to make. They want to pay.
Doesn't mean it's wrong.
It doesn't, not necessarily, but it means that we should be cautious about why they're saying it and so on. They want to pay as little tax as possible to keep as much profits as possible. 70% of all the income in this country goes to corporations in the form of profits. Only 30% goes to labour in the form of wages, that includes relatively well-paid workers. That compares to an EU average of about 50-50 split between labour and profit. So the corporations are doing extraordinarily well. We don't think that it's a sustainable model to continue to try to win this race to the bottom in terms of corporation tax. Instead, I'm a socialist. I think that the major sections of the economy, the electricity companies, transport, logistics, should actually be in democratic public ownership, should be planned as part of a rapid, just transition to a zero carbon economy, because these companies aren't going to do it based on profit, and you want to address the housing crisis, climate crisis. That's the kind of measure you need.
Jim, we need to raise more money if we want to improve public services, and that is true whether you believe in kind of Paul's model of public ownership or not. That is a fair point to make, is it not?
Well, I guess if you look at public spending on public services, I mean, social transfers, this year we're going to spend over 23.3 billion on social welfare, okay? And the statistics from the Department of Finance show that social transfers, excluding pensions, reduce those at risk of poverty from 36.5% to 13.2%. So we have a strong system of social transfers in this country. And in this country, we do have a significant inequality in terms of pre-tax income. But then if you take taxation out of it then and you superimpose what we spend on social transfers, there's a huge distribution from the well-off to the less well-off. And that's the system we live in. Okay, and then you look at other public services. I mean, you have to ask yourself the question, is the lack of resources the biggest problem in the delivery of public services. If you look at the increase we've seen in health expenditure over the last 20 years, and if you then measure the outcomes we've got from that expenditure, there certainly isn't a strong correlation. If you are going to pump billions more taxpayers' money into public services, you need to make sure that the public sector and these public services are capable and efficient in delivering better public services.
Okay.
But that is not the record.
All right. Well, on that note, Jim Power, economist, and Paul Murphy, people for profit TD for Dublin South West, thank you both very much for joining me.